Welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because, wow, we're going to unpack one of the most dramatic, frankly, unbelievable corporate tragedies in modern business history. We're talking about a company going from owning literally 50% of the entire smartphone market to essentially zero in just a few short years. How does that even happen? Well, we're going to dissect exactly how a massive, highly successful company fundamentally misread the market, leading to one of the absolute biggest technology declines we've ever seen. If you're the kind of focused learner who loves extracting deep strategic lessons from real-world events, you are going to absolutely love this story. Let's get right into it. So I want you to cast your mind back. Think about a world before the iPhone, before Android, before these glowing sheets of glass absolutely dominated our pockets, our dinner tables, and, well, pretty much every single aspect of our daily lives. In that world, there was BlackBerry. And it wasn't just a phone, you guys. It was an absolute cultural phenomenon. People were so physically and psychologically hooked on that blinking red notification light and the super satisfying click of that keyboard that the device actually earned a globally recognized nickname, the Crackberry.
Okay, let's dive into this. Owning a BlackBerry in the early 2000s wasn't just about having a mobile device. No way. It completely symbolized power, immense productivity, and ultimate status. Think about this. When Barack Obama entered the White House in 2009, he famously fought his own Secret Service and actually won just to keep his BlackBerry. Kim Kardashian used to buy them in bulk on eBay, literally hoarding them in a drawer just in case the company ever stopped making them. If you had one of these devices, it meant you were important, it meant you were connected. So how on earth did one of the most dominant, prestigious technology companies in the entire world collapse so dramatically?
Chapter 1. Kings of Mobile Communication. At their absolute peak, BlackBerry wasn't just leading the smartphone market. They owned it, lock, stock, and barrel. They were viewed by almost everyone as entirely untouchable. Why? Because they had built an absolute fortress. They were famous for their tactile, highly efficient physical keyboards. I mean, you could type out a whole email without even looking down. But even more crucially, they had legendary secure messaging, BlackBerry Messenger or BBM, which created this incredibly exclusive walled garden. Governments trusted them with their deepest, darkest secrets. Corporate IT departments absolutely loved them. Executives literally carried these devices everywhere because they were the ultimate engine for getting work done. Their strengths were so overwhelming, they seemed permanent. But here is the critical foreshadowing for our story. That overwhelming, blinding success, it became the very seed of their massive downfall. Chapter 2. The SWOT Strategic Illusion. That brings us to a really fascinating psychological trap. To truly understand BlackBerry's massive failure, we have to look at it through the lens of a SWOT analysis. Now, SWOT is a brilliant, widely used strategic management framework that evaluates strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's used in business schools and boardrooms all over the world. But here's the critical catch. A SWOT analysis is kind of like a mirror. It only works if you're not using funhouse glass, right? It requires brutal, unflinching honesty about your reality. And let me tell you, that is incredibly difficult to achieve when you are generating billions of dollars in revenue and feel entirely invincible. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it breaks down exactly where BlackBerry, which was originally known as Research in Motion, by the way, went wrong in every single category of that framework. Because of their insular corporate culture, they built a massive echo chamber. They vastly overestimated their strengths. They completely ignored important creeping weaknesses in their software architecture. They wildly misread future opportunities in the consumer market. And they fatally underestimated competitive threats. They essentially created a profound strategic blindness because they kept analyzing the market through the lens of their past victories rather than looking honestly at future customer behavior. Chapter 3. When Strengths Become Weaknesses. This brings us to a massive paradigm shift. I mean, what happens when the consumer market starts moving right under your feet? BlackBerry genuinely believed customers would always prioritize the enterprise, physical keyboards, and raw efficiency. They viewed the smartphone as a strict utilitarian tool, to check emails and review spreadsheets. But the new consumer reality was changing at warp speed. Everyday consumers didn't want a boring corporate tool. They wanted vibrant touchscreens, engaging apps, multimedia experiences, and simpler interfaces. Smartphones were stopping being primarily business tools and were rapidly becoming pocket-sized entertainment and lifestyle hubs. So BlackBerry's greatest historical strength, their hyper-focus on enterprise functionality and IT security, suddenly became a paralyzing strategic limitation.
Chapter 4: The Touchscreen Disruption.
And here is the inciting incident of our tragedy, the absolute shockwave. January 2007. Steve Jobs steps onto the stage at Macworld and introduces the iPhone. It wasn't just another phone. It was a completely different vision of mobile technology, heavily relying on large touchscreen displays and consumer-centered design. Up at BlackBerry headquarters in Waterloo, Canada, executives watched this presentation in utter disbelief. The story actually goes that they literally thought Apple was lying. They believed a screen that big would drain the cellular networks and kill the battery in less than an hour. They thought it was a technical impossibility. And honestly, more importantly, they thought it was just a toy. But post-2007, the floodgates completely opened with the rise of Android devices, intensifying competition dramatically. The tragic hubris here is just astonishing. Inside BlackBerry, the leadership was completely insulated from this new reality. Executives confidently stated that touchscreen keyboards would fail because people absolutely needed the tactile feel of real buttons. They convinced themselves that serious business users would categorically reject entertainment-focused devices. They leaned hard on the assumption that battery life concerns would permanently limit widespread adoption. So instead of aggressively reinventing themselves to meet this massive new threat, they dug their heels in. They basically decided the consumer was wrong and they were right.
Chapter 5: Too Little, Too Late. Because they dug their heels in, the market moved rapidly toward Apple's vision without them. Now, BlackBerry did eventually attempt to respond, but it was in a state of total panic. They rushed out the BlackBerry Storm. This was their first touchscreen attempt, and wow, it was notoriously buggy. The screen was mechanically designed to click down like one giant physical button, but it was a catastrophic failure that severely damaged their pristine reputation. By then, they had fallen into the absolute most dangerous strategic position in business, moving from market leader to frantic market follower. Because they delayed, massive app developers had already prioritized iOS and Android. Consumers had already committed. Powerful network effects took over. The more users Apple and Android gained, the stronger their ecosystems became. BlackBerry was no longer leading innovation. They were just reacting. And once that perception changes in the tech world, recovery becomes nearly impossible.
Chapter 6: Lessons in Strategic Survival. So, the crucial point is embedded right here in these 5 strategic lessons. This is the absolute intellectual core of our explainer today. Lesson 1: Past success does not guarantee future relevance. Actually, success often breeds a really dangerous complacency. Markets evolve continuously. Lesson 2: Core competencies can become core rigidities. Your greatest strengths can actually become weaknesses if you become entirely dependent on them to the exclusion of innovation. Lesson 3: You must constantly analyze changing end-user behavior, not just what your corporate buyers or IT departments want. Lesson 4: Remember that disruptive innovation often looks like a toy at first. The iPhone initially lacked basic enterprise features. It didn't even have copy and paste at launch. But it completely changed customer expectations. And Lesson 5: Maintain strategic flexibility. You've got to pivot before you are forced to. If you can't adapt quickly, you are going to lose your competitive advantage, regardless of your past dominance.
Now, as a quick epilogue, it's really important to note that BlackBerry's story isn't entirely over. The company actually still exists today. They successfully found a footing by pivoting into enterprise software and cybersecurity. Even more impressively, their QNX software now quietly powers the infotainment systems of millions of cars around the world. So they still have immense technical talent, and they managed a massive pivot. But their unbelievable smartphone collapse remains the ultimate textbook lesson in how incredibly fast market leadership vanishes when customer expectations change at scale. Failing to adapt is often far more dangerous than the competition itself.
Which leaves us with this final, critical thought. Strategy isn't just about perfectly understanding the current landscape. BlackBerry saw the past perfectly clearly, while the future quietly moved somewhere else entirely. So ask yourself, in whatever projects, businesses, or strategies you're working on right now, are you building for where the market is today or where it is going tomorrow? Think about that, keep learning, and I'll see you in